Florida spent decades as America's retirement paradise. Sunshine, beaches, no state income tax, and entire communities built around the idea of retirement. So why are thousands of retirees quietly packing up and leaving the very state they once dreamed of moving to? The answer isn't what most people think, and one of the biggest reasons has almost nothing to do with the weather. According to a 2026 analysis of 2025 moving data, Florida still drew the most inbound retirees aged 65 and older of any state, with 45,696 arriving, but nearly as many left. 44,881 seniors moved out of the state that same year, leaving a net gain of just 815 people. That was enough to knock Florida out of the top 10 states for net senior migration entirely. Florida isn't shrinking, but the dream that built it is starting to crack at the edges. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why, and what it might mean for your own retirement plans, wherever you happen to live right now. Welcome to Settled Living, where we help you make sense of retirement decisions without the spin and without the sales pitch. If you're finding this helpful, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming. Let's get into why Florida's retirement story is changing, and changing fast. For most of the last 50 years, the math was simple. No state income tax meant your Social Security, your pension, your retirement withdrawals. All of it stayed fully in your pocket. Add in warm winters, beaches, golf courses, and entire towns built specifically for retirees, and Florida wasn't just a popular choice. It was the default choice. If you were retiring and didn't know where to go, you went to Florida. That's not an exaggeration. For generations, it was simply assumed. But that's not the biggest reason things have started shifting. Here's where things get even more surprising. Because the retirees leaving Florida right now are often not the people you'd expect. Picture a retired schoolteacher named Linda, 68, who moved to a coastal community near Tampa 8 years ago with her husband. They weren't struggling. They had savings, a paid-off home, and exactly the retirement they'd pictured for 30 years of teaching. Linda wasn't driven out by financial desperation. She left because the predictability she'd been promised slowly disappeared. Insurance premiums climbed every single renewal. Hurricane seasons brought a low hum of anxiety that never fully went away, even in years when no storm made landfall near them. And the cost of simply maintaining the home she loved kept rising faster than her fixed income could comfortably absorb. Linda and her husband didn't leave Florida because they failed at retirement. They left because the math that once worked in their favor had quietly flipped against them. Most retirees never see this coming, and it starts with something almost nobody budgets for properly: homeowners insurance. Florida has faced a genuine property insurance crisis since 2021, with many national insurers exiting the state entirely. Citizens Property Insurance, the state-run insurer of last resort, has expanded to fill the gap, but with higher premiums and stricter wind coverage requirements. Coastal properties and older homes now routinely face annual insurance premiums between $5,000 and $30,000 or more, a cost that can partially or fully offset the income tax savings that drew retirees to Florida in the first place. Think about what that actually means for a retired couple on a fixed income. The exact tax advantage that made Florida attractive can simply evaporate into a single insurance bill. And here's where things get even more interesting, because there is some genuine relief on the horizon. Insurance rates are expected to drop in 2026, with Citizens cutting rates by an average of 8.7% statewide, and private insurers like State Farm cutting premiums by around 10%. But for retirees who've already weathered several years of spiraling costs and uncertainty, that relief is arriving after the damage to their trust and their savings has already been done. Picture a retired Navy veteran named Robert, 71, living near Jacksonville. He moved to Florida specifically because veterans receive meaningful benefits there, and he loved being near the water after decades of service. But year after year, his insurance renewal letter became something he genuinely dreaded opening. One year, his premium jumped by nearly 40%, with no claims filed and no changes to his home. He described it to a neighbor as feeling like the ground was moving under him financially, even though nothing about his actual risk had changed. Robert hasn't left Florida yet, but he started seriously looking at other states for the first time in 15 years, and that alone tells you something about how deep this anxiety runs. But there's another factor almost nobody talks about, and it's not insurance, it's property taxes. And the picture here is more complicated than people assume. Florida's effective property tax rate sits at approximately 0.91% statewide, below the national average. And long-term homeowners benefit from something called the Save Our Homes assessment cap, which limits annual increases in assessed value to just 3% for homesteaded properties. After 10 to 20 years, a long-term homeowner's assessed value can sit 30 to 50% below market value, creating a real and meaningful discount compared to a new buyer. Here's the catch nobody explains clearly. That protection disappears the moment you sell. If you've lived in your Florida home for 2 decades and you're protected by that cap, leaving the state or even moving to a different home within Florida means losing accumulated savings you can't get back. For a lot of long-term Florida retirees, this single detail is quietly keeping them in homes that no longer fit their needs, simply because the financial penalty for leaving feels too steep to justify. What happens next catches many retirees off guard, because Florida lawmakers have actually moved to address this. A constitutional amendment headed to the November 2026 ballot could raise the homestead exemption from the current $50,000 to $150,000 in 2027 and up to $250,000 by 2028, potentially eliminating non-school property taxes entirely for many homeowners. If voters approve it, this could meaningfully change the calculation for retirees currently sitting on the fence. But ballot measures aren't guarantees, and the retirees making decisions right now don't have the luxury of waiting 2 years to find out how a vote turns out. Picture a widowed retiree named Patricia, 74, living alone in a condo near Sarasota after her husband passed away 3 years ago. Her situation reveals something that catches a lot of condo owners completely off guard. Following new state safety requirements after tragic building collapses elsewhere in Florida, many condo associations have been hit with massive special assessments to fund structural inspections and repairs. Patricia's monthly HOA fee, which had been a manageable few $100s for years, suddenly came with a special assessment bill in the tens of thousands of dollars, due within a relatively short window. She didn't have that kind of cash sitting around, and at 74, taking out a loan for it felt overwhelming. The emotional toll wasn't just financial. It was the realization that the community she'd chosen specifically for its low-maintenance lifestyle had become a source of the exact financial stress she'd moved there to avoid. There's another piece of this puzzle that doesn't get nearly enough attention, and it has nothing to do with insurance or taxes at all. It's healthcare access. Florida has long marketed itself as a healthcare-friendly state for retirees, and in many ways it still is, with major medical systems throughout the state and one of the largest Medicare Advantage markets in the country. But some retirees in fast-growing areas report a different reality on the ground. Longer waits to see specialists than they experienced back home. Difficulty finding a primary care doctor who is still accepting new Medicare patients, particularly in counties where the retiree population has grown faster than the local medical infrastructure could expand to match it. The issue isn't that Florida lacks healthcare. The issue is that population growth in some of the most popular retirement counties has sometimes outpaced access, leaving newer arrivals competing for appointment slots in a system that was built for a smaller population than the one actually living there now. For retirees managing ongoing conditions, that gap between expectation and reality can be just as unsettling as an insurance bill, because it touches something even more personal than money. If you currently live in Florida, or you've considered moving there, let us know your experience in the comments. We'd genuinely love to hear what your situation has actually looked like. Here's something worth sitting with for a moment. because it might be the single most important reframe in this entire video. The retirees leaving Florida are often not the people viewers expect. They're not people who failed at retirement planning. They're not people in financial crisis. In fact, one of the fastest growing groups leaving Florida isn't struggling financially at all. They're doing something most people wouldn't expect, and we're about to show you exactly what that is. Many of them did everything right, saved diligently, paid off their homes, planned conservatively, and still found themselves squeezed by costs that simply didn't exist, or existed at a fraction of the size when they first made the move. What they're choosing when they leave isn't desperation. It's predictability. It's the simple desire to know what their monthly costs will look like next year, instead of bracing for another insurance renewal letter or HOA assessment that could upend a carefully built budget overnight. This pattern even has a nickname now. Real estate circles call these movers halfbacks. Retirees who moved to Florida from the north and are now moving partway back, settling in states like the Carolinas or Georgia that offer milder costs without fully returning to the colder climates they originally left. It's not abandoning the dream of a warmer, easier retirement. It's recalibrating it. Picture a snowbird couple, Frank and Dolores, who spent 15 winters splitting their time between Ohio and a small condo near Fort Myers. They loved their winters in Florida, genuinely loved them, the sunshine, the golf, the friends they'd made in their community. But after watching their condo's insurance and HOA costs climb relentlessly while their fixed income stayed essentially flat, they made a decision that surprised even their own children. They sold the Florida condo and bought a modest home in upstate South Carolina instead. They still get real winters there, milder than Ohio, but real nonetheless, and they still get warm enough summers to enjoy their yard. What they gained was something harder to put a price tag on: the ability to actually predict their monthly costs a year in advance, something Florida hadn't been able to offer them for years. But before we get to the bigger picture here, there's something important you need to understand, because not everyone is leaving, and the reasons people stay matter just as much as the reasons people go. Picture a retired contractor named James, 69, who's lived in the same Florida home near Ocala for over 20 years. He's watched insurance costs rise. He's watched neighbors leave, but James benefits from that Save Our Homes cap we talked about earlier. His property taxes have stayed remarkably low for 2 decades, and he made the deliberate choice years ago to maintain his home aggressively. Newer roof, hurricane shutters, updated electrical, specifically to keep his insurance costs as manageable as possible. For James, Florida still works. He's not naive about the challenges. He just made specific, intentional choices that insulated him from the worst of what's been pushing other retirees out. His story is a reminder that this isn't really about Florida being good or bad. It's about whether your specific situation, your home, your finances, your risk tolerance lines up with what Florida currently asks of the people who live there. So where are retirees actually going instead? Multiple recent rankings of the best places to retire in 2026 show states like Texas, North and South Carolina gaining serious ground, offering a blend of cost, comfort, and care that's drawing people who once would have automatically chosen Florida. North Carolina in particular has actively worked to attract older Americans, offering Atlantic coastline and favorable weather without quite the same level of hurricane exposure or insurance volatility that's been hammering Florida's coastal communities. Some retirees are also looking at Tennessee, Georgia, and parts of the Gulf Coast outside Florida entirely, chasing that same original promise: sunshine, affordability, low taxes, without the specific volatility that's been building in Florida's insurance and housing markets over the past several years. The next reason is forcing some retirees to rethink everything. And it's simpler than insurance or taxes. It's just the accumulated weight of uncertainty itself. Even retirees who haven't been personally hit with a massive premium increase or a surprise assessment describe a kind of background anxiety that builds over years of watching neighbors deal with it. reading local news about another insurer pulling out of the state and wondering if they're next. That low-grade stress, even when it never fully materializes into a crisis, is itself a real cost of staying. One that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet, but absolutely affects quality of life. So what does this actually mean if you're evaluating your own retirement plans? Whether you're in Florida right now, thinking about moving there, or considering somewhere else entirely. The lesson here isn't that Florida is a mistake. For retirees like James, who bought decades ago, who benefit from assessment caps, who've made specific choices to manage their insurance risk, Florida still delivers exactly what it always promised. But for newer arrivals, for condo owners facing fresh special assessments, for anyone whose budget has little room to absorb a sudden $5,000 or $10,000 increase, the calculation looks very different than it did 15 years ago. The real lesson extends well beyond Florida. Whenever you're evaluating a place to retire, don't just look at the headline number, the lack of income tax, the median home price, the advertised cost of living. Look at the total picture: insurance markets, property tax structures, and how they treat long-term residents versus newcomers, HOA and condo health, healthcare access relative to local population growth, climate risk and what it might cost you specifically, not just in premiums, but in stress and unpredictability. A state that looks perfect on a spreadsheet can still create real financial pressure if you don't fully understand how all of these pieces interact with each other over time. If this video helped you better understand what's happening in Florida and what it could mean for your own retirement plans, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss future retirement updates. Linda, Robert, Patricia, Frank, Dolores, and James all made different choices, shaped by different circumstances, and none of those choices were wrong. What they share is something far more valuable than any single decision. They each took the time to look clearly at their own numbers, their own risk tolerance, and their own version of what peace of mind actually requires, rather than assuming the dream they once chased still fits the life they're living today. That's really the only question that matters in the end. Not whether Florida is good or bad, but whether it's still right for you. We'll see you in the next one.